Rob Roy Hotel was constructed and completed in 1886 and represents an important stage in Auckland's development, where we move from the early timber history to the more permanent masonry growth around the 1880s. And more importantly, it has undergone very little alteration to the exterior, which means that you can look at the building and still really see what it would have been like when it was constructed. Moving historic buildings has not really looked on favourably by many heritage organisations, which has made moving the Rob Roy a challenge. But having the sensitivity and commitment to the project by the contractors, and particularly the engineers, has made this project a real joy to work on.
The birdcage presents a number of problems, because as well as moving it, it is also in its current state deemed to be seismically under strength. So for the strengthening, like all these old brick buildings, they have timber floors and unreinforced brick walls. In a reasonable earthquake, what can tend to happen is that because the floor joists are only lightly fixed into the walls, the inertia from the walls can move them outwards, and the floor can then drop, and you can have a rather nasty sort of catastrophic collapse. For the brick walls themselves, we have to make sure that they are strong enough to span between the floors, and we call that face loading or out of plane loading. So for the out of plane loading, so that's the walls themselves kinking like that potentially, we've strengthened in two different ways. On this beautiful fair face street facades, anything we do has to be invisible. So in order to strengthen the walls for their out of plane or face loading, we've pre-compressed them, and they've done that by drilling a hole from the top of the parapet all the way down to the foundation beam and inserting in that a pre-tensioning rod. Now the brick is quite strong in compression, but not very strong in tension, because of course it's got relatively weak mortar between the bricks. The tensioning rods are effectively at every original column or pier in the building. So between each set of windows, we've dropped a bar all the way down. By compressing it with the tension rods, it means that no crack opens up, and that's how we give the face load strength to these fair face facades. So what we've done on the back of the building is a different technique, which has involved spraying really the entire face of the building with about 125 millimetres of concrete, reinforced concrete. Now, because the original brickwork wasn't the beautiful fair face brickwork that they have on the street frontages. It was in fact the brick had been rendered over, plastered originally, so it looked a bit like concrete. So that will be replicated on top of the concrete that you can see, and that is deemed to be an acceptable, if you like, heritage solution. Now it's actually doing two functions. One is it's, if you like, a less involved method of providing the out-of-plane actions, which on the front we were doing with the post-tensioning. Here, the reinforcing within the sprayed wall does that job for us. It has a second function in that it provides the walls with in-plane strength, which stops the, if you like, the wall sliding in the plane of the wall and provides the overall seismic strength to the building. Inside of the building, there's even more work being done, tying the walls to the floors and creating what we would call structural diaphragms. An important part of the strengthening, in fact an essential part, is tying the floors to the walls of the building, what we call the diaphragms, and strengthening those so that they can distribute the loads from the building across to our sprayed walls, which are the primary load-resisting elements. And essentially what we've done is fixed plywood to the underside of the existing floor, and around the edge of the plywood you can see the steel angles which are fixed to both the ply diaphragm and into the brick walls all the way around. There's a second diaphragm at the roof of the building, and we've put that above the ceiling of the first floor. By doing that, it's meant that we were able to really not enter the first floor of the building at all. So it was quite important from a heritage point of view to do least disruption inside the first floor, and we've been able to achieve that.
We went to live in the Rob Roy with my mother and father, who was the publican there from, I would say, 1964 onwards for 4 or 5 years. And he, at that stage, it was a bit of a change of events for a young fellow. It was from living in a normal suburban house to living in a hotel in the bottom of town. It was quite a learning curve, I've got to say. After 4 or 5 years of living there, some of the formative years of my life, I think these places all get demolished, but now to see it moved back and move back again and to be back to its former glory would be a really nice thing, I'd say, for not just for me, but for a lot of people at Freeman's Bay, because they would remember it, those that have been around that time would remember it well themselves. And I can't wait to see it back to its former glory and go and have a drink myself.
Before we could start construction, we had to remove a lot of the heritage items from the building. We had a very important bar unit, a mirror clock and some paintings. Inside the main bar here there was a lot of panelling that we couldn't remove. So what we've done is protected it in situ with timber plywood. Outside the building we've also removed elements including the bird cage itself and some lights that were on the front facade.
So the space we're in here looks rather grand and tall, but it is in fact 2 stories. It was the ground floor plus the basement. We've taken out the ground floor just really for the process of strengthening and moving. And in its final location, we will of course put back a floor, and that becomes the essential 3rd diaphragm at ground level. And it'll be poured on top of the sandwich beams which run round at the bottom of the ground floor. And of course the sandwich beams are an essential part of the moving system. They are the frame which supports the building while it moves. And of course it is the link between the strengthening, that's the walls and the stressing rods, and the foundations. So behind me you can see, if you like, the exterior sandwich beam. And for each exterior one there's a corresponding one inside. And like a sandwich, the brick is between the 2 concrete beams.
In terms of the construction of the sandwich beams, we've had to remove a lot of the original brick walls to put our stress bars through, and also prop the brick walls where there's large voids. The concrete itself that fills those voids and provides an even stronger beam.
When it moves, it'll be cut off at about this level here. We're standing in the basement. We're not taking the basement, we're taking everything above the basement. So every wall that comes down, whether both the external walls and the internal walls that arrive down at the ground floor level, are supported on a sandwich beam. So the beams are poured on both sides, and then we stress between them with the bolts that clamp the concrete to the brickwork and therefore take the load in a very effective way. And then they distribute that load to what we call the sliding bearings, which is the point of contact between the sandwich beam and the runway beams. Now, the runway beams are what the building actually moves along, and of course the direction of the runway beams, like a railway track, defines the direction of your move.
At the back of the building here, we're doing the bulk of the excavation. This excavation allows us to construct the runway beams parallel with Franklin Road, and the Rob Roy Hotel will slide along the runway beams about 45 metres out of the way of the tunnel. And right underneath where we're standing here is the new Freeman's Bay stormwater culvert. This culvert replaces the existing culvert, and our runway beams go right over top of it. The excavation here is almost complete, so in a week or so we're going to be starting the construction of the runway beams, and that's going to be very exciting.
We're really pleased with the progress and the quality of the work. The strengthening is effectively complete, and the sandwich beams are well advanced, and it's really only a few weeks now until we move.
I'm really thrilled with the way that the project has worked out. We're going to have the bird cage restored to its original position. I became involved when a number of residents approached me, Hamish Keith, Richard Reid, a strong advocate of returning it to its original position. And I was very pleased to work with the Victoria Park Tunnel Alliance to come up with a technical solution that would restore the bird cage to its natural position. I think it's great because I think for generations to come, people will now be able to sit and have a beer at the Rob Roy or the bird cage, and there will be a beautiful public space for the residents of Ponsonby and Freeman's Bay to enjoy in the future.